The house was too quiet when Elena Shaw stepped through the front door that evening. She kicked off her heels and let them fall beside the entrance table, her feet aching from a long day at the office. The silence felt wrong somehow. Derek's car was in the driveway, but none of the usual sounds greeted her. No television, no music, no running water from the shower he usually took after his evening run. She loosened her blazer and walked through the living room, past the kitchen, where the morning's coffee cups still sat unwashed in the sink. Derek had promised to handle the dishes. He hadn't. That was becoming a pattern lately. A lot of things were becoming patterns. The light was on in the home office at the end of the hall. That was where she found him. Derek sat at the desk with his back to the door, his laptop open, his voice low and intimate in a way that made Elena's stomach tighten before she even processed what she was seeing. The screen glowed blue in the dimming evening light, and on it was a woman. A beautiful woman with long auburn hair and a smile that was too familiar, too comfortable. "I can't wait either," Derek was saying, his voice soft in that special way Elena used to think was reserved for her. "Just a little while longer, and we won't have to hide anymore." Elena's hand gripped the door frame. She should have announced herself. She should have walked away. Instead, she stood frozen, watching her husband lean closer to the screen like he wanted to climb through it. "I hate lying to her," the woman said, and Elena could hear the false sympathy in her voice. "Does she suspect anything? Elena?" Derek laughed. Actually laughed. "No, she's too busy with work. That company is like her real marriage. I'm just the guy who lives in her house." The words hit like physical blows. Elena's breath caught in her throat. After years of building a life together, of supporting his career when his startups failed, of putting his dreams before her own promotion opportunities, and this was what she got in return. "Poor thing," the woman said, but her smile said she didn't mean it at all. "When are you going to tell her about us?" "Soon," Derek promised. "I'm just waiting for the right moment. My lawyer says I need to be strategic about it." His lawyer. He already had a lawyer. Elena's eyes focused on the background behind the woman on the screen. There was a logo on the wall. A distinctive geometric design in blue and silver. Summit Tech Solutions. Her heart stuttered. She knew that logo. She had been staring at it during negotiations. Summit Tech Solutions was the mid-sized tech company her investment firm had just acquired. The deal was done, sealed, irreversible. She was now effectively the boss of everyone who worked there, including apparently her husband's mistress. The woman shifted on screen, and Elena caught a glimpse of a name placard on her desk. Lila Cross, marketing director. "I should go," Lila said, glancing at something off screen. "Someone might come by my office. Call me later." "Always," Derek said, and a tenderness in his voice made Elena want to scream. They exchanged goodbyes that were too long, too sweet, too everything that Elena's marriage had stopped being somewhere along the way without her noticing. Or maybe she had noticed. Maybe she had just been too busy, too focused on her career, too trusting to believe her husband would do this. The call ended. Derek sat back in his chair and sighed, a smile playing on his lips, the smile of a man in love, the smile he used to give Elena. She stepped back from the doorway, her mind racing. Her hand found her phone in her pocket. She needed to think. She needed to document everything. She needed to not fall apart right here in the hallway of the house she had bought with her own money from her own bonus years ago. Elena walked quietly back down the hall, grabbed her heels, and slipped out the front door. She sat in her car in the driveway, her hands shaking on the steering wheel. The evening air was cool through the open window. Somewhere down the street, children were playing, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Normal life continuing all around her while hers shattered into pieces. But as she sat there, something shifted inside her. The initial shock began to crystallize into something else. Something harder, something calculating. She owned Lila Cross's company. She had signed the final acquisition papers herself. Summit Tech Solutions and all its employees now answered to Shaw Capital Investments. They answered to her. Derek had no idea. When she had told him about the acquisition, he had barely looked up from his phone. "That's great, honey," he had said, distracted, disinterested. He had no idea what company she had acquired. He never asked about her work anymore. Elena opened her phone and pulled up her work email. She scrolled through until she found the employee directory for Summit Tech Solutions. There was Lila Cross, marketing director, hired a couple of years ago, salary $90,000 a year, department marketing and brand development, direct supervisor Marcus Holt, VP of marketing. She took a screenshot, then she opened her personal photo gallery and started going through the pictures from recent months. There. That photo from a while back when she had grabbed Derek's phone to show him something and seen a text notification from someone named L. He had snatched the phone back quickly, said it was a colleague. She had believed him. There. The credit card statement from a few months ago with charges to a hotel downtown. He had said it was a work conference. She had been too busy with a major merger to question it. There. The new cologne he had started wearing recently. The haircut that was suddenly more stylish. The gym membership he had suddenly taken seriously after years of her encouraging him to exercise. All the signs had been there. She had just been too trusting, too busy, too convinced that their marriage was solid to see what was right in front of her. Elena took a deep breath and opened a new contact in her phone. She typed carefully, Vivian Hale, attorney at law. Vivian was the best divorce lawyer in the city. Elena had recommended her to a colleague recently. Now she would need her for herself. But first she needed to go back inside and act normal. She needed to play this smart. Derek thought she was clueless. He thought he was in control of the situation. He had no idea that the balance of power had just shifted completely. Elena checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were dry. She had cried over Derek before. When his business had failed, when his father had died, when they had lost their first pregnancy years ago. She had cried with him and for him. She wouldn't cry over him now. She got out of the car, slipped her shoes back on, and walked back to the front door. She opened it loudly this time, called out a cheerful, "I'm home," and listened as Derek scrambled in the office, probably closing whatever he had been doing on his computer. "Hey, babe," he said, appearing in the hallway with a smile that looked genuine if you didn't know better, if you hadn't just watched him promise forever to someone else. "How was work?" "Exhausting," Elena said, setting her bag down and moving past him toward the kitchen. "Well, good. The Summit Tech acquisition is going smoothly. We start integration soon." "Summit Tech?" He followed her into the kitchen. "That's the company you just bought?" "Mm-hmm." She opened the refrigerator and stared at its contents without really seeing them. Mid-sized tech firm. About 200 employees. Should be a good investment. "That's great." His voice was distracted already. His phone buzzed in his pocket. She saw him glance at it, saw the small smile that crossed his face before he caught himself. "I'm going to order dinner," Elena said. "Ty okay with you?" "Sure, whatever." He was already moving back toward the office. "I've got some work to finish up." "Work? Right." Elena ordered the food and then went upstairs to their bedroom. She opened her laptop and created a new folder on her desktop. She labeled it Legal Documents and started downloading and saving everything she could find. Bank statements, property records, credit card bills, tax returns. Every email where Derek had asked her to invest in his ideas, to cover his debts, to pay for things because his accounts were temporarily short. She had been the primary earner in their marriage from day one. Derek had grand ideas but terrible follow-through. She had supported him financially and emotionally, believing that's what partners did. That's what love was. She had been wrong. By the time the Thai food arrived, Elena had compiled a comprehensive financial picture of their marriage. It was stark. Her name was on the house title. Her income had paid the mortgage. Her savings had bailed out his failed businesses. The car he drove was leased under her credit. Their joint accounts held her money. Derek had contributed charm and promises and big dreams that never materialized, and now he was planning to leave her for a woman who worked at a company Elena had just bought for $40 million. The irony would have been funny if it didn't hurt so much. They ate dinner in front of the television, barely speaking. This had become their normal over recent months. Elena had thought they were just going through a rough patch. All marriages had them. She had been willing to work on it, to try harder, to make time for them despite her demanding job. But Derek hadn't been going through a rough patch. He had been planning his exit. He had been building a new life with someone else while letting Elena pay for the old one. "I'm heading to bed," Derek announced at some point, kissing the top of her head absently. "Early meeting tomorrow." Elena doubted there was any meeting. More likely, he wanted to call Lila without Elena around to overhear. She nodded and watched him go upstairs. She waited a while, then followed quietly. The bedroom door was closed. She could hear his voice through it, low and intimate. She didn't bother trying to listen. She already knew what he was saying. She had heard it all earlier. Instead, she went to the guest bedroom and sat on the bed in the dark. She pulled out her phone and sent an email to Vivian Hale. "Need to schedule consultation, or urgent, regarding divorce." The response came back quickly. "I can come to your office if you prefer privacy." "Perfect," Elena typed back. "See you then." She looked at her phone for a long moment, then opened her work email again. She pulled up the Summit Tech organizational chart and studied it carefully. Lila Cross reported to Marcus Holt, who reported to the COO, who reported to the interim CEO, who was about to be replaced by Shaw Capital's chosen candidate soon. Elena had complete oversight of the integration process. She had the authority to review all departments, all personnel files, all performance metrics. She could make changes. She could restructure. She could, if she found legitimate business reasons, terminate employees who weren't meeting standards or whose positions were redundant in the new structure. Everything by the book. Everything legal. Everything justified. She wasn't going to do anything rash. She wasn't going to let emotion drive her decisions. But she was going to protect herself, her assets, and her future. And if Lila Cross happened to discover that sleeping with other women's husbands had professional consequences, well, that would just be an unfortunate coincidence. Elena set her phone aside and lay back on the guest bed, staring at the ceiling. Her marriage was over. She had known it the moment she saw Derek's face on that video call. The man she married didn't exist anymore, if he ever had. In his place was a stranger who could lie to her face and plan with someone else while living in her house and spending her money. But she wasn't powerless. She wasn't going to fall apart. She had built her career from nothing, working twice as hard as her male colleagues to prove herself. She had negotiated million-dollar deals. She had saved failing companies. She had made tough decisions that affected hundreds of people. She could handle one cheating husband and his mistress. Elena closed her eyes and breathed slowly. She would meet with Vivian. She would get legal advice. She would protect her assets. She would document everything. And then she would let Derek ask for the divorce. Because he would. She had heard him tell Lila he was waiting for the right moment. Well, she would give him his moment. She would let him think he was in control, that he was making the decisions, that he was getting away with it. And then, when he least expected it, he would discover that divorcing Elena Shaw was the biggest mistake of his life. In the days surrounding that discovery, Elena had walked into the conference room on a high floor with her team trailing behind her. The view from Shaw Capital overlooked the entire downtown district, a sprawling vista of glass and steel and ambition. It was the kind of view that reminded you what was possible if you worked hard enough and wanted it badly enough. She had wanted it badly. "Good morning, gentlemen," Elena said, taking her seat at the head of the long marble table. 4 men from Summit Tech Solutions sat across from her, their lawyer at the end. They looked nervous. They should be. Their company was bleeding money, and Shaw Capital was their last hope before bankruptcy. "Miss Shaw," their interim CEO said, a tired-looking man in his 60s named Leonard Hayes, "thank you for meeting with us again." Of course. Elena opened the folder in front of her and pulled out the revised offer her team had prepared. We've reviewed your financials in detail. I'll be frank. Your company has strong bones but poor management. Your product development team is excellent. Your customer retention is solid, but your operating costs are unsustainable and your marketing spend is excessive for the returns you're seeing. The men shifted uncomfortably. The truth often had that effect. Our offer is $40 million, Elena continued. That's down from our initial 45, reflecting the additional debt we discovered during due diligence. In exchange, Shaw Capital will inject $20 million in operating capital over the coming period, restructure your departments, and implement new leadership. Your employees will be retained where possible, though we will conduct performance reviews across all departments. And if we refuse? Asked the CFO, a man named Victor, whose brow was already sweating. Elena smiled, but it wasn't warm. Then you can try to find another buyer. But we both know you've been shopping this company for some time. Shaw Capital is your best offer. It's also your last one. We're prepared to walk away if you can't commit today. She wasn't bluffing. She had other potential acquisitions on her desk. Summit Tech was appealing, but it wasn't irreplaceable. That's what made her good at this. She never needed the deal more than the deal needed her. Leonard exchanged glances with his team. Then he nodded slowly. We'll accept your terms. Excellent. Elena pulled out the contract and slid it across the table. My legal team will coordinate with yours for the closing. The meeting continued for another hour, hammering out details and timelines. Elena's assistant Maya took notes while her legal counsel Andrew fielded questions about the transition process. By the time they stood to shake hands, the deal was essentially done. One thing, Elena said as the Summit Tech team prepared to leave, I'll need access to all personnel files and department budgets soon. I want to review them before we close. Of course, Leonard agreed. I'll have my assistant send everything over. After they left, Elena's team gathered around the table for a debrief. That was masterful, Maya said, grinning. You had them from the moment you said you'd walk away. They needed us more than we needed them, Elena replied, but she felt the familiar thrill of a successful negotiation. This was what she was good at. This was where she felt in control. Andrew, make sure the due diligence is airtight. I don't want any surprises after closing. On it, Andrew said. Though I have to say their books are pretty clean. The problems are operational, not ethical. That was good. Elena didn't like inheriting scandals. She had enough to deal with turning around underperforming companies without adding legal nightmares to the mix. The personnel files arrived the next day, delivered in a secure digital folder that Maya uploaded to Elena's private server. Elena spent an evening at home going through them. Derek was out, another work dinner that she had stopped asking about months ago. The house was quiet and she spread the files across her home office desk, reviewing each department systematically. The sales team was solid. The IT department was overstaffed but talented. Customer service needed work, and then there was marketing. Elena pulled up the marketing department files and started reading. The VP, Marcus Holt, seemed competent enough. His reports were thorough and his budgets, while high, showed clear ROI justifications. But as she dug deeper into the individual personnel files, she noticed something odd. The marketing director, Lila Cross, had expense reports that seemed excessive. Client dinners that were too frequent, hotel stays in cities where Summit Tech didn't have clients, conference attendance at events that didn't align with the company's industry. Elena made a note to flag this for review. It could be legitimate. Sales and marketing often required travel and entertainment expenses. But it could also be someone taking advantage of loose oversight. She would investigate further after the acquisition closed. She clicked on Lila's photo in the file. An attractive woman with long auburn hair and a bright smile stared back at her from the screen. Professional headshot, probably from the company website. She looked friendly and approachable, the kind of person who would be good in client-facing roles. Elena closed the file and moved on to the next department. She didn't give Lila Cross another thought. She was just another employee in a company of 200. just another file to review, just another line item in the restructuring plan. By the time the legal teams were finalizing contracts, the money was being transferred. The deal was done. Shaw Capital Investments owned Summit Tech Solutions. Elena celebrated with her team at a downtown restaurant, drinks flowing, and congratulations echoing around the table. She called Derek from the bar to tell him the news. "That's great, honey," he said, his voice distant. "Sorry, I'm in the middle of something. Can we talk later?" "Sure," Elena said, trying not to feel disappointed. This was a big deal. She had just closed a $40 million acquisition. But Derek had been distracted for months now. She told herself it was just stress. Everyone went through rough patches. She went home that night feeling accomplished and lonely at the same time. The house was empty. Derek didn't come home until late. She was already asleep or pretending to be when he slipped into bed beside her without a word. They barely spoke the next day. He claimed he had work to catch up on and spent the day in his home office with the door closed. Elena did laundry and answered emails and tried not to think about how disconnected they had become. The following morning, she was back in her office at Shaw Capital, reviewing the integration timeline for Summit Tech. Her team had outlined a plan to streamline operations, reduce costs, and improve profitability. Phase 1 would involve department-by-department reviews starting soon. "I want to handle marketing personally," Elena told Maya during their morning briefing. "Something about their expenses doesn't sit right with me." "You think there's fraud?" Maya asked, pulling up the relevant files on her tablet. "Maybe. Or just sloppy management. Either way, it needs attention." Elena studied the numbers again. "Schedule meetings with the VP and each department head. I want to understand exactly where this money is going." Maya made notes and sent out meeting requests. By the end of the day, Elena had appointments scheduled with the entire marketing department over the coming period. She was in meetings all morning about a different acquisition. She fielded calls from investors about returns. She reviewed contracts for a potential partnership. And then one evening, she came home to find her husband on a video call with one of her new employees, promising her forever and complaining about the wife who was too busy to notice his affair. Now sitting in her office waiting for Vivian Hale to arrive, Elena thought about the strange timing of it all. If she had acquired a different company, she never would have seen Lila's name. If she hadn't come home early that evening, she might not have discovered the affair for some time. If Derek had been even slightly more careful, she could have been blindsided by divorce papers with no idea what was coming. Instead, she held all the cards. She knew about the affair. She owned the mistress's company. She had control of the finances. And Derek had no idea what was about to hit him. The elevator dinged, and Vivian Hale stepped into the reception area. She was exactly what Elena expected. Sharp suit, sharper eyes, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Elena," Vivian said, extending her hand, "thank you for reaching out. Let's talk in your office." They settled into the leather chairs by Elena's window. The morning sun was bright against the glass, painting everything in harsh, clear light. Elena liked it. She was done with shadows and secrets. "Tell me everything," Vivian said, pulling out a legal pad and pen. So Elena did. She told Vivian about the video call, about Lila Cross, about the years of marriage and the lifetime of lies. She told her about the assets, all in her name. She told her about the failed businesses she had funded. She told her about the Summit Tech acquisition and the terrible timing that made all of this so much worse and so much better at the same time. Vivian listened without interrupting, taking notes in neat, precise handwriting. When Elena finished, Vivian set down her pen and looked at her with something like admiration. "You've documented everything?" Vivian asked. "Everything I could find. Screenshots, bank records, emails, text messages." "Good. Here's what we're going to do." Vivian leaned forward. "You're going to let him ask for the divorce. Don't confront him about the affair yet. Let him think he's in control of the situation. When he presents you with papers, you're going to have your own already prepared. We'll file simultaneously. which means he can't surprise you or try to hide assets. What about the house, the cars, the joint accounts? All in your name or primarily funded by you, which makes this much simpler. We'll do a full asset inventory, but based on what you've told me, you should be able to retain most of your property. He'll get whatever he came into the marriage with, which from what you've described isn't much. And Lila? Elena asked. The fact that she works for my company now? Vivian's smile was sharp. That's a completely separate matter. Your professional obligations to Shaw Capital's acquisition have nothing to do with your personal life. If you discover performance issues or financial irregularities during your standard review process, you address them as you would with any employee. You document everything, follow HR protocols, and make decisions based on legitimate business concerns. So I can't fire her for sleeping with my husband? Absolutely not. That would be personal retaliation and could expose you to a lawsuit. Vivian's eyes glinted. But if you discover through proper channels and documentation that she's been misusing company resources or underperforming in her role, then you handle it as a business matter. Elena nodded slowly. She understood. This had to be clean, professional, unimpeachable. I'll draft divorce papers today, Vivian continued. Keep copies in a safe place. When Derek makes his move, call me immediately, day or night. And Elena? Vivian's expression softened slightly. I'm sorry you're going through this, but from where I'm sitting, you're going to come out of this just fine. Better than fine, actually. After Vivian left, Elena sat at her desk and stared out at the city. Somewhere down there, Derek was probably at his meaningless job, texting Lila and planning their future. Somewhere down there, Lila was at Summit Tech Solutions, sitting in an office with a logo on the wall, completely unaware that her new boss was about to make her life very complicated. Elena had built this career from nothing. She had clawed her way up through a male-dominated industry by being smarter, tougher, and more relentless than everyone around her. She had made difficult decisions. She had fired people. She had restructured companies. She had done what needed to be done, always within the rules, always by the book, always with documentation to back up every choice. This would be no different. She pulled up her calendar and confirmed upcoming meetings with the Summit Tech marketing department. Everything would be professional. Everything would be proper. Everything would be documented. And if Derek and Lila's perfect little love story ended up collapsing under the weight of their own bad decisions, well, that wasn't Elena's fault. That was just consequences. The following days passed in a strange, surreal calm. Elena moved through her house like a ghost in her own life, watching Derek with new eyes. Every smile seemed calculated. Every word felt like a lie. He ordered pizza one night and they ate it while watching a movie neither of them cared about. He kissed her cheek before bed, and she let him, her skin crawling at the casual intimacy of it. One morning, he went for a run and came back later, sweating and smiling with his phone in his hand. She had seen him check it several times while tying his shoes. Probably texting Lila, probably counting down the days until he could be with her openly. Elena spent an afternoon at a coffee shop downtown, her laptop open, building a timeline. She started with the first sign she could remember. When he had started dressing better. When he had suddenly become interested in going to the gym. When he had stopped initiating any real conversations about their future together. She cross-referenced dates on credit card statements with his calendar, business trips that seemed unnecessary, late nights at work that became more frequent, the hotel charges she had noticed and dismissed as work conferences. It all lined up. The affair had probably started some time ago, right around the time Elena had been promoted and her hours at the office had increased, right when she had been most distracted, most consumed by work, most trusting that her marriage was solid. She screenshotted everything. Bank statements showing her income versus his, property deeds in her name, investment accounts she had built before and during the marriage, the prenuptial agreement she had insisted on years ago, which Derek had signed without much protest because he had nothing to protect back then. That prenup was going to save her now. It specified that assets brought into the marriage or earned individually during the marriage would remain separate property. Joint purchases would be split equitably based on contribution. Since Elena had contributed the vast majority of their joint finances over the years, Equitable was going to heavily favor her. One morning, Elena dressed in her sharpest suit, a navy blue with a red silk blouse that meant business. She put on her favorite heels, the ones that made her taller and made every step sound like a declaration. She applied her makeup with care, creating armor out of foundation and lipstick. Derek was still asleep when she left. He had been sleeping later and later recently, now that he didn't bother pretending to care about his job. His position at a consulting firm was entry-level despite his age, a favor from a friend rather than something he had earned. He went to the office a few days a week and worked from home the rest, or worked, which apparently meant video calling his mistress. At Shaw Capital, Elena threw herself into work. She had several meetings before lunch, all requiring her complete focus. She analyzed quarterly reports, strategized with her team about the next acquisition target, and reviewed integration progress on other recent purchases. Being in her office, making decisions that affected millions of dollars and hundreds of jobs, this was where she felt powerful. This was where she was in control. At some point, Maya knocked on her door. "The Summit Tech Department reports are in. Do you want to review them now or wait until the scheduled meetings?" "I'll look at them now," Elena said. "Send them over." The files appeared on her screen moments later. She pulled up the marketing department first, her jaw tight. The numbers were worse than she had initially thought. The department's budget had increased significantly over the last year, but their measurable outcomes had declined. Client acquisition was down, brand awareness campaigns had flopped, social media engagement was stagnant. Meanwhile, expense reports showed a pattern of spending that made Elena's trained eye narrow with suspicion. Dinners at expensive restaurants with vague descriptions like client entertainment, hotel rooms booked for conferences that didn't appear on any industry calendar, Uber rides to residential addresses rather than business locations. Lila Cross's expense reports in particular showed charges that would require explanation. Either she was spectacularly bad at her job and wasting company money, or she was using company resources for personal purposes. Either way, it was a problem. Elena created a new folder and started documenting everything. She pulled comparison reports from other marketing directors in Shaw Capital's portfolio. She researched industry standards for marketing expenses. She built a case file that had nothing to do with her personal life and everything to do with professional standards. If she was going to take action, it would be unassailable. One evening, Derek came home late again. Elena was in the living room, reading a book she wasn't actually processing when he walked in late. "Sorry," he said, not meeting her eyes. "Work ran late." "No problem," Elena replied, her voice pleasant. "Did you eat?" "Yeah, I grabbed something at the office." Another lie. His office didn't have food services. He had been with Lila. "How's the project going?" Elena asked, naming a project she knew didn't exist. She wanted to see if he would even bother to maintain the lie. Good. Should wrap up soon." He was already moving toward the stairs. "I'm exhausted, going to shower and crash." He disappeared upstairs and Elena returned to her book, her face expressionless. He hadn't even blinked. He was so comfortable lying to her, now that he didn't bother to keep his story straight. The next morning she found a text message on his phone. She hadn't meant to snoop. Or maybe she had. The phone was on the kitchen counter while he showered, face up, and a message appeared on the screen. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Wear the blue dress I like." The message was from a contact labeled Sam. Elena took a photo of the screen with her own phone, then went upstairs and got ready for work like nothing had happened. That evening, Derek announced he had another work dinner. He left wearing cologne and the shirt Elena had bought him for his birthday. She wondered if Lila knew that his wife had picked out his wardrobe. If it bothered her at all that she was dating a married man who still lived with his wife, still slept in the same bed, still shared a life even if it was hollow. After he left, Elena went to his office. She had resisted going through his things until now, wanting to respect some boundary even as he trampled all over theirs. But that was foolish. Respect was for relationships that deserved it. His laptop was password protected, but Elena knew his passwords. He used the same few combinations for everything, including their wedding date. The irony was bitter. She found his email first. Messages from Lila going back months, just as she had suspected. The early ones were flirtatious but careful. By some point they had crossed every line. The messages were explicit, detailed, planning assignations at hotels in her apartment, making promises about their future together. "Once you're free of her," Lila had written, "we can really start our life together. I can't wait to be your wife." His wife. Lila wanted to be his wife while Elena still was his wife. Elena's hands shook as she forwarded select emails to her own encrypted account. She documented everything, dates, times, locations. She took screenshots and backed them up in several separate secure locations. This was evidence for the divorce, for the lawyers, for the moment when Derek would inevitably try to paint himself as the victim. She found his text messages next, thousands of them with Lila, hundreds more deleting his location history and clearing his call logs. He had been methodical about covering his tracks, but not quite careful enough. One folder in his email was labeled legal. Elena opened it. Inside were messages with a divorce attorney named Philip Grant. They had been corresponding for some time. Derek had been getting advice on how to protect himself financially in a divorce, how to establish fault, how to make sure the split was favorable to him. "Since your wife is the primary earner," Philip had written, "you may be entitled to spousal support depending on your jurisdiction and the length of the marriage. I'll need detailed financial records to build your case." Derek had been planning to ask her for alimony. After years of her supporting his failed dreams and his lavish lifestyle on her dime, he was planning to divorce her and demand she continue paying for his life. Elena sat back in his desk chair and laughed. It was a harsh, bitter sound in the quiet office. The absolute audacity of this man. The sheer entitlement. She forwarded those emails to Vivian Hale with a short message. "He's planning to ask for spousal support." Vivian's response came back within minutes. "Don't worry. With your prenup and his employment status, he has no case. Document everything you're finding. This helps us." Elena continued searching. She found a shared calendar with Lila marking their meetings. She found photos he had hidden in a locked folder, pictures of them together, kissing, holding hands, playing happy couple. She found apartment listings he had saved, places he was planning to move into with Lila after the divorce. By the time she heard his car in the driveway late, she had copied every relevant file and cleared all evidence of her searching. She closed his laptop, turned off the office light, and went upstairs to the guest bedroom where she had been sleeping for some time, claiming his snoring was keeping her awake. He didn't question it. He probably preferred it. More time to text his girlfriend without his wife lying next to him. One evening, Elena met with Vivian again at a discreet restaurant across town. She brought a USB drive with all the evidence she had compiled. "This is excellent documentation," Vivian said, scrolling through files on her tablet. "With this level of proof, the divorce will be straightforward. He's clearly engaged in an extramarital affair. He's consulted with an attorney about protecting his interest, and he's planning to leave. The prenup is ironclad. You'll retain your separate property, which is essentially everything. He might try to argue for joint assets, but there aren't many." "What about the house?" Elena asked. "Purchased with your money, title in your name? He has no claim. Same with the cars, the investments, the retirement accounts. It's all yours." Vivian looked up from the tablet. "Elena, I know this is painful, but from a legal standpoint, you're in an excellent position. He came into this marriage with nothing and contributed almost nothing. He leaves with nothing. When do you think he'll make his move?" "Based on his attorney's emails, I'd say soon. He's building his case, Documenting what he thinks will help him. Let him. Everything he's doing just strengthens our position. Vivian closed the tablet. In the meantime, I need you to do something that might be difficult. You need to act completely normal. Don't confront him. Don't let on that you know. The more he thinks he's in control, the more mistakes he'll make. I can do that, Elena said. She had been doing it for some time. And the situation with Lila Cross at Summit Tech? I have my first meeting with the marketing department soon. I'm reviewing all personnel files and expense reports. If there are legitimate business reasons for action, I'll take them. Everything by the book. Good. Keep your personal and professional lives completely separate in terms of documentation. No emails about your marriage from your work computer, no discussions about Summit Tech with anyone involved in your divorce. We need clear boundaries. Elena nodded. She understood. This had to be clean. No one could ever claim she had acted out of personal vengeance. Every decision had to be justified by business needs and professional standards. They finished dinner and parted ways. Elena drove home through the quiet streets, her mind spinning. Soon. She had some time before Derek would sit her down and tell her he wanted a divorce, probably with some speech about growing apart and needing different things. He would act like it was mutual, like they had both failed, like there was no villain in this story. She would let him have his speech. She would nod and look sad and sign his papers, and then she would hand him her own papers, prepared by the best divorce attorney in the city, outlining exactly how this was really going to go. She pulled into her driveway and sat in the car for a moment, looking at her house. It was a beautiful home in a good neighborhood. She had bought it years ago with her bonus. She had decorated it, maintained it, paid every bill. Derek lived in her house like a guest who never left. Soon he would be gone. Soon this would just be her house again, her space, her peace. She could hardly wait. The moment came one evening when Elena had been expecting it, preparing for it. But when Derek asked her to sit down in the living room because they needed to talk, her heart still stuttered in her chest. This was it. The conversation that would end years of marriage and start something new. She sat on the couch, her hands folded in her lap, her face carefully neutral. Derek paced in front of the coffee table, his expression practiced in its solemnity. He had rehearsed this, she realized. He had probably written it out, maybe even run it past Lila. Elena, he began, and his voice was gentle, almost pitying. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately. About us. About our marriage. Okay, she said simply. She wasn't going to make this easy for him, but she wasn't going to be hysterical either. She was going to be calm, collected, and completely in control. I think we both know things haven't been good between us for a while now. He stopped pacing and looked at her. You're so focused on work. You're never here. Not really. And I feel like we've grown apart. The words stung even though Elena had known they were coming. She had been focused on work. She had been building a career, supporting them both, creating financial security while he bounced from one failed venture to another. But instead of appreciation, she got blamed for his infidelity. I see, Elena said. I don't think either of us is happy anymore, Derek continued. And I think it's time we were honest about that. I think we should get a divorce. There it was, the words hanging in the air between them. He looked nervous now, like he was worried about her reaction. Maybe expecting tears or begging or anger. Elena took a slow breath. If that's what you want? He blinked, clearly surprised by her calm response. You're not upset? I'm sad, she said, which was true. She was sad about the loss of what she had thought they had, but she wasn't devastated. Devastation required surprise, and she had none left. But if you feel like this is the right decision, then I won't fight it. We're both adults. If the marriage isn't working, it isn't working. Derek's relief was visible. His shoulders relaxed. His expression softened. He had expected a battle and instead got surrender. He thought he was winning. I appreciate you being so understanding, he said. I want this to be amicable. I don't want to fight over things or make this ugly. Neither do I. Elena stood up. Have you spoken to an attorney? I have. Yes. I can give you his information if you need help finding someone. How generous of him. That's fine. I'll find my own representation. Did you want to use a mediator or handle this through lawyers? I think lawyers would be cleaner, Derek said. My attorney is drawing up papers. He should have them ready soon. That works for me. Elena moved toward the stairs. I'm going to go read in the guest room. Let me know when dinner is ready. She walked away before he could respond, her head high, her steps steady. Only when she was safely behind the closed door did she let herself breathe fully. Her phone was in her hand immediately. Vivian, it's happening. He just asked for a divorce. Perfect. Vivian's voice was crisp and professional. How did he seem? Confident. Relieved that I didn't fight it. He said his attorney is drawing up papers soon. Good. I'll have ours ready soon. When he serves you, call me immediately. We'll file simultaneously. Are you okay? Elena looked at herself in the mirror across the room. Her reflection showed a woman in control. Perfectly composed, unbroken. I'm fine. Actually, I'm better than fine. This is what I've been waiting for. Over the following days, Derek was almost cheerful. The tension that had been strung tight between them for months seemed to evaporate now that the truth was in the open, or at least his version of the truth. He hummed while making coffee one morning. He smiled at his phone constantly. He was probably texting Lila, telling her the good news. Finally free. Finally theirs. Elena maintained her composure. She went to the gym, ran errands, and had lunch with a colleague who had no idea her personal life was imploding. To the outside world, everything was normal. To Derek, she was the understanding wife making the best of a difficult situation. Inside, she was counting down hours until the papers arrived. One morning, Elena's phone rang while she was in her office. It was Derek's attorney, Philip Grant. His voice was smooth and professional as he informed her that he was emailing over divorce papers for her review. Miss Shaw, I'm sure this is difficult, but my client is hoping we can handle this matter efficiently and amicably. If you could review the documents and have your attorney contact me, we can begin negotiations. I'll have my attorney reach out, Elena said coolly. Thank you for the call. She hung up and immediately called Vivian. Papers just arrived. Mine are already prepared. Give me a little time to file. Don't sign anything from his attorney. Don't even respond yet. Elena opened the email from Philip Grant and read through the divorce petition Derek had filed. It was everything Vivian had predicted. He was requesting spousal support, citing the disparity in their incomes. He was claiming entitlement to half of all marital assets, conveniently forgetting that almost everything was her separate property under the pre-nuptial. He was portraying himself as a devoted spouse who had supported her career at the expense of his own. The audacity was almost impressive. Her phone rang again. Vivian. Filed. Your papers are officially submitted to the court. I'm emailing his attorney now to inform him that you have separate representation and have filed your own petition. He's going to be very surprised. I'm looking at his demands now, Elena said. Spousal support and half the assets, which he's entitled to none of based on your prenup. My petition makes that very clear. We're asking for enforcement of the prenuptial agreement, division of the very minimal joint property based on actual contribution, and denial of all support claims based on his employment status and the marriage duration. How long does this usually take? With a solid prenup and clear documentation, we should have a settlement within a few months. Maybe sooner if he realizes he has no leverage. The only question is whether he'll try to fight it and waste everyone's time and money. Elena suspected he would try. Derek didn't like losing, but he was about to learn that wanting something didn't mean you deserved it. The call came soon after. Derek, his voice tight with fury. What the hell, Elena? You already had an attorney. You filed your own papers. You filed yours, she replied calmly. Did you expect me to wait around? You made it seem like you were fine with this, like we were going to be reasonable. I am being reasonable. I'm following the prenup we both signed. I'm dividing assets according to actual contribution. I'm doing exactly what the law requires. Her voice never rose. If you don't like what my petition says, take it up with your attorney. You're asking for everything, the house, the cars, all the accounts. I'm asking for what's mine. The house is in my name, purchased with my money. The cars are leased under my credit. The accounts contain my earnings. If you bothered to read our prenup, you'd remember that we agreed to keep our assets separate. I supported your career. I took care of the house. Elena almost laughed. You ordered takeout and occasionally ran the dishwasher. That's not supporting a career, Derek. That's basic adult functioning. This is ridiculous. My attorney says I'm entitled to support. Your attorney is wrong, but please waste your money fighting it. I have all the documentation we need to prove exactly what you contributed to this marriage, which was almost nothing. She paused. Is there anything else? I have a meeting in a little while. He sputtered on the other end, clearly not expecting her to be so cold, so completely unmoved by his anger. Finally, he hung up without another word. Elena set her phone down and allowed herself a small smile. That had felt good. Really good. For weeks, she had been playing the role of the oblivious wife, the understanding partner, the woman who didn't realize she was being betrayed. Now the mask was off, and Derek was finally seeing who she really was. Someone who didn't lose. That evening, she came home to find the house empty. Derek's car wasn't in the driveway. Some of his clothes were gone from the closet. He had left, probably to Lila's apartment, probably to cry about how his wife had turned out to be a cold-hearted witch who wouldn't just hand over everything he wanted. Elena walked through the quiet rooms of her house and felt something loosen in her chest. This was what peace felt like. No more pretending, no more tension, no more watching a liar perform false affection. Just her space, her home, her life. She poured herself a glass of wine and sat on the back deck, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Her phone buzzed with an email from Maya. Summit Tech marketing meeting scheduled soon, full department review, files attached. Elena opened the attachment and began reading. Soon she would walk into that office and meet with Marcus Holt and his team, including Lila Cross. They wouldn't discuss her personal life. They wouldn't mention Derek. This would be strictly professional. But Lila would know. The moment she saw Elena sitting at the head of that conference table, she would know exactly who her new boss was. And she would understand that her comfortable little life was about to get very complicated. Elena finished her wine and went inside to prepare. She had a divorce to finalize and a company to restructure. Neither task required emotion. Both required precision, documentation, and absolute professionalism. She had all three in abundance. The legal proceedings and business meetings continued in a blur. The divorce moved through the courts steadily. Derek's attorney tried to fight the prenup, claiming it was signed under duress. But Vivian demolished that argument with signed documents, witness statements from the attorney who had drafted it, and evidence that Derek had reviewed it for some time before signing. He tried to claim he deserved spousal support based on the years he had sacrificed for her career. Vivian presented his employment history, showing he had never held a job for long, had never earned a substantial income, and had never contributed meaningfully to the household expenses. He tried to argue for half the house. Vivian provided the property deed, mortgage payments exclusively from Elena's account, and the prenup clause specifically protecting separate property. Eventually, the settlement was reached. Derek got his personal belongings, his car, which was in his name, but financed by Elena, and a modest amount from their joint savings account, which represented approximately his total contribution over the years. Everything else stayed with Elena. The divorce was finalized around the holidays. Elena signed the papers in Vivian's office, her hand steady. She walked out of the building legally single for the first time in years. She expected to feel something dramatic, relief or sadness or anger. Instead, she just felt lighter, like she had put down a heavy bag she had been carrying too long. The new year brought new beginnings. At Shaw Capital, the Summit Tech integration was going well. Most departments had been streamlined. Performance was improving. The marketing department, however, remained under review. Elena had met with Marcus Holt and his team several times now. Each meeting had been professional and thorough. She had reviewed budgets, examined campaigns, analyzed ROI. The numbers told a clear story. The department was overstaffed for its output, and certain expense patterns were concerning. Lila Cross had been present at some of those meetings. The first time, Elena had watched recognition and horror dawn on the woman's face. Lila had gone pale, her hands shaking slightly as she shuffled papers. She hadn't said much during that meeting, letting Marcus do most of the talking. The next meeting, Lila had tried to be professional. She presented campaigns she had worked on, defended her expense reports with explanations that sounded rehearsed. Elena listened impassively and took notes. She asked pointed questions that Lila struggled to answer. When had this client dinner occurred and what was the outcome? What measurable results came from that conference attendance? Why were there hotel charges in a city where Summit Tech had no clients? Lila had no good answers. Marcus looked uncomfortable. The other team members avoided eye contact. "Thank you for your time," Elena had said at the end. "We'll review this information and get back to you regarding next steps." She had seen Lila in the parking lot afterward, sitting in her car with her head in her hands. Elena had driven past without a glance. That was some time ago. Now Elena was in her office reviewing the final analysis from her team when Maya knocked on her door. "Have you seen this?" Maya asked, holding out her phone. Elena took it and looked at the screen. It was a social media post, a photo of Derek and Lila both smiling broadly. Lila's left hand was prominently displayed, showing an engagement ring. The caption read, "She said yes. Couldn't be happier to start this new chapter. Hashtag engaged, hashtag new beginnings, hashtag forever love." The post was from Derek's account and had been shared by Lila on hers. The comments were full of congratulations from friends who apparently had no idea he had only been divorced recently. Or maybe they didn't care. People rarely did when a relationship drama wasn't their own. Elena stared at the photo for a long moment. Derek looked happy, genuinely happy in a way he hadn't looked with her in years. Lila was beaming, pressing her cheek to his, the ring catching the light. They had moved fast, from finalized divorce to engaged quickly. They must have been planning it for some time, waiting impatiently for the divorce to be over so they could start their real lives together. "I'm sorry," Maya said softly. "That's insensitive of him to post it so publicly." Elena handed back the phone. "It's fine. His life is his concern now." But it wasn't fine. Not entirely. Not because she wanted Derek back. That ship had sailed and sunk. But because seeing them so happy, so public about their love story, made her feel like the villain in their narrative. Like she was the obstacle they had overcome. The cold wife who hadn't appreciated him, the career woman who chose work over love. That afternoon, Elena attended a board meeting where she presented Summit Tech's progress. One of the other board members, a man named Charles, who had never liked her, made a comment during the break. "Sorry to hear about your divorce, Elena. Rough timing with the holidays." "These things happen," she replied evenly. "I saw your ex-husband is already engaged. That was fast." Charles's tone was too casual, too interested. He smelled gossip. "Good for him," Elena said. "Is there anything else you needed to discuss about the Summit Tech integration?" Charles smiled, recognizing he'd been shut down. "No, that's all. Great presentation, by the way." But the damage was done. By the end of the day, Elena could feel the whispers following her through the office. People knew. Of course they knew. Derek's engagement announcement had made the rounds. Some of her colleagues had probably connected the dots. Summit Tech employee, Elena's recent divorce, the rushed engagement. She was being pitied. She hated it. That evening, she went home to her empty house and poured herself a glass of wine. She looked at her phone and, against her better judgment, pulled up Derek's social media. The engagement post had many likes now. Friends and family celebrating their love. People she had spent holidays with, people who had attended their wedding, people who were now acting like that. Marriage had never mattered. One comment caught her eye. It was from Derek's mother. "So happy for you both. We always knew you deserved someone who understood you." Elena read that line several times. She had helped Derek's mother through her husband's death. She had paid for the funeral when Derek couldn't afford it. She had visited every week for months afterward, bringing groceries and sitting with her, and now she was implying that Elena had never understood her son. She set the phone down before she could read more. This was the problem with divorce. Everyone picked sides, rewrote history, decided who was the hero and who was the villain based on incomplete information and their own biases. Her phone rang. "Vivian?" "I saw the engagement announcement," Vivian said without preamble. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." "You don't have to be fine. It's okay to be angry about this." Elena leaned back on her couch and stared at the ceiling. "I'm angry. Not because I want him back, but because they get to be happy while I'm the bad guy. Everyone's talking about how I was too focused on my career, how I neglected him, how she's so much better for him, and nobody knows the truth. The truth is you supported a grown man for years while he failed at everything and cheated on you," Vivian said firmly. "The truth is you had every right to protect your assets in the divorce. The truth is they're celebrating a relationship that started while he was still married to you. None of that makes you a villain." "It doesn't feel that way when I'm at the office and people are looking at me like I'm some corporate ice queen who drove my husband away. Let them think what they want. The people who matter know the truth, and more importantly, you know the truth." Vivian paused. "Besides, I'd be more concerned about their future than your reputation. Relationships that start as affairs tend to have complications." Elena knew that was probably true, but right now, in this moment, it didn't feel like enough. She wanted vindication. She wanted everyone to know what Derek had done, what he really was. She wanted to stop being the sympathetic failure in this story. But she couldn't control the narrative. She could only control her actions. And her actions needed to remain above reproach. The next morning, she walked into Shaw Capital with her head high. She wore her most powerful suit and her most confident smile. When colleagues offered condolences or asked tentative questions, she responded with professionalism. "I'm doing well, thank you for asking. The divorce was mutual and amicable. I wish them both happiness." Lies, all lies. But they were the right lies to tell. The ones that made her look mature and unaffected. At some point, she had another meeting with the Summit Tech executive team. They were discussing the final phase of integration and the personnel changes that would accompany it. "The marketing department requires restructuring," Elena told them. "Our analysis shows redundancy in several positions and continued performance issues despite intervention. I'm recommending we eliminate 3 positions and redistribute responsibilities." Marcus Holt nodded slowly. He'd seen this coming. "Which positions?" 2 junior marketing associates and the director position. The director role will be consolidated with the VP role for now, with Marcus assuming those responsibilities. If we determine we need a separate director later, we'll reevaluate. That's going to be difficult for morale, the COO said. "I understand, but the department is underperforming and over budget. These changes are necessary for the company's health." Elena kept her voice steady and professional. "HR will handle all terminations according to protocol. We'll provide severance packages and outplacement services." The meeting continued with discussion of other departments. When it ended, Elena returned to her office and reviewed the termination paperwork that HR had prepared. Lila Cross's name was at the top of the list. It was completely justified. The director position truly was redundant. Lila's performance reviews were mediocre at best. Her expense reports were still questionable. Every metric supported this decision, but Elena knew how it would look if anyone connected the dots. the ex-wife firing the new fiancé. Corporate revenge disguised as business strategy. She called Vivian. I need you to review something. I want to make absolutely sure this is legally sound and can't be challenged as retaliation. She sent over all the documentation, performance reviews, expense reports, departmental analysis, industry comparisons, everything that justified eliminating Lila's position. Vivian called back an hour later. This is solid, Elena. The business justification is clear. The decision is defensible. If anyone questions it, you have documentation showing this was based entirely on legitimate business concerns. I need this to be perfect, Elena insisted. I can't have any appearance of personal motivation. It is perfect. You've done everything right. Now you have to trust that. Elena hung up and signed the termination approval. The papers went to HR, who would schedule the meeting with Lila for the following period. She should have felt satisfied. This was part of her revenge, not just the divorce settlement, but the complete dismantling of the comfortable life Lila had built while sleeping with someone else's husband. But instead, Elena just felt tired. This whole situation was exhausting. The legal battles, the workplace whispers, the social media announcements. She wanted it to be over. She wanted to move forward. She wanted to stop being defined by this divorce and start being known for something else. But first, she had to finish what she started. The termination meeting was scheduled soon. Elena wouldn't be present. That was HR's responsibility. But she knew when it was happening. She watched the clock in her office and imagined the scene playing out in the Summit Tech building. Maya brought her coffee at some point. The HR team left for Summit Tech a little while ago. Thank you. Elena wrapped her hands around the warm cup and stared out her window. The sky was bright and clear, afternoon light reflecting off the glass towers that made up the city skyline, beautiful and impersonal. Later, her phone buzzed. A text from Leonard Hayes, the former Summit Tech CEO who now served as a senior advisor. Terminations completed. Cross took it hard. Security had to escort her out. Elena read the message twice, then deleted it. She didn't want details. Didn't want to imagine Lila crying or arguing or whatever reaction she had. This was business. It had to stay business. But the human part of her, the part she tried to suppress during work hours, felt a twinge of something. Not guilt exactly. Lila had made her choices. She had knowingly pursued a married man. She had participated in the deception. She had celebrated their engagement publicly, while Elena's colleagues whispered about the scandal, so losing a job was hard, even when you deserved it. Elena pushed the thought away and returned to work. She had other meetings that afternoon and a conference call with investors. Her personal drama couldn't interfere with her professional responsibilities. The call to her cell came later, just as she was wrapping up for the day. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "You vindictive witch!" Lila's voice was raw with tears and rage. "You fired me because of Derek. Because you're jealous that he chose me." Elena closed her office door and spoke quietly. "Lila, you were terminated because your position was redundant and your performance was below standard. This had nothing to do with my personal life. That's a lie and you know it. You've had it out for me since the merger. You've been looking for excuses. I've been doing my job, which is to make Summit Tech profitable. That required restructuring. I'm sorry you were affected, but the decision was based entirely on business metrics. I'm calling a lawyer. This is retaliation and discrimination, and I'll sue you and your whole company. You're welcome to pursue legal action if you feel your termination was unjust. All our documentation is available for review, but I'd recommend speaking to your attorney before making accusations. Employment law is complicated. Derek was right about you. You're cold. You care more about money and power than people. That's why he left you." The words stung more than Elena wanted to admit. "If there's nothing else, I need to go. Your severance package includes outplacement services. I hope you find something new quickly." She hung up before Lila could respond. Her hands were shaking. She set the phone down and took several deep breaths. Cold. Calculating. Career obsessed. These were the words people used to describe women who succeeded in business. Men with the same qualities were called ambitious and strategic, but women? Women were cold. Her phone rang again. Derek this time. She didn't answer. He called several more times, left angry voicemails she deleted without listening to, sent text messages demanding she call him back. Finally, she replied with a single message. Legal issues regarding Summit Tech should go through our respective attorneys. Don't contact me directly again. She blocked his number. She should have done that months ago. Maya knocked softly and opened the door. Everything okay? You look upset. I'm fine, Elena said automatically. Then she reconsidered. Maya had been her assistant for years. She was discreet and loyal and had seen Elena through multiple crises. Actually, I'm not fine, but I will be. Maya came in and closed the door behind her. The cross-termination? She called me. Derek, too. They're angry. They have every right to be angry, Maya said, but not at you. They created this situation. They made choices that had consequences. That's not your fault. Everyone's going to think I did it out of revenge. Some people will think that. Others will look at the documentation and see it was a justified business decision. The people who matter, your bosses, your colleagues, who understand finance, they'll know you did the right thing. Maya sat in the chair across from Elena's desk. Can I be honest with you? Please. I think you're being too hard on yourself. You're so determined to be perfect, to never let emotion influence your decisions, to be above reproach. But Elena, you're human. You're allowed to be angry that your husband cheated on you. You're allowed to feel satisfied that his mistress faced professional consequences for her poor performance. Those feelings don't make you a bad person. Elena looked down at her hands. I don't want to be the kind of person who uses power for personal revenge. You're not. You made a business decision that happened to affect someone who hurt you personally. That's different. If Lila had been a stellar employee with perfect records, would you have kept her on staff just to avoid looking petty? No, I would have found a different position to eliminate. Exactly. Because this was about business. The fact that it also removed a problematic person from your professional sphere is just a bonus. Maya smiled slightly. Stop beating yourself up for being good at your job. After Maya left, Elena sat alone in her office as the sun set outside her window. The city lights began to twinkle on. Thousands of lives being lived in those buildings. People going home to families, to partners, to empty apartments. Everyone dealing with their own complications and heartbreaks and triumphs. She wasn't special, her divorce wasn't unique, her pain wasn't exceptional, but it was hers, and she was allowed to feel it without shame. Her work phone rang. It was Andrew, her legal counsel. We received notice from Lila Cross's attorney, he said. They're threatening to file a wrongful termination suit. Elena's stomach tightened. Do they have a case? Not based on what I've reviewed. The business justification is solid, and we followed all proper procedures, but they might file anyway, hoping to force a settlement. Then we fight it. I'm not settling. Let them examine every document. Let them depose every witness. We did this by the book. That's going to cost money in legal fees. I don't care. I'm not giving them a cent just to make this go away. If they want to fight, we'll fight. Andrew chuckled. That's what I wanted to hear. I'll draft our response. Don't worry, Elena. We've got this. The weeks that followed were tense. Lila's attorney did file suit claiming retaliation and discrimination. Shaw Capital's legal team responded with a mountain of documentation. Performance reviews, expense audits, departmental analyses, industry comparisons. Everything showed that Lila's termination was justified by legitimate business concerns. The attorney tried to establish a connection between Elena's personal life and the professional decision, but there was none to find. Elena had never mentioned her marriage in any work communication. She had never discussed Derek or Lila with Summit Tech employees. She had maintained complete separation between her personal drama and her professional responsibilities. Eventually, Lila's attorney was quietly suggesting they drop the case. There was no evidence of retaliation. Shaw Capital's documentation was impeccable. Pursuing this further would only cost Lila more money she didn't have. The suit was withdrawn with no settlement and no admission of wrongdoing from Shaw Capital. Elena received the news in an email from Andrew and felt a weight lift from her shoulders. It was over, finally over. That evening, she treated her team to dinner at an upscale restaurant downtown. They celebrated the successful Summit Tech integration, which was now showing profit growth for the first time in years. No one mentioned the lawsuit or the drama. They just enjoyed good food and better company, toasting to their success. Elena looked around the table at her team, Maya, Andrew, and other executives who had worked tirelessly on the acquisition. These people had her back. They respected her work. They knew her worth wasn't defined by her marriage or divorce. "Thank you," she said, raising her glass, "for all your hard work on this project. Summit Tech is successful because of what you all contributed. Here's to many more wins together." They clinked glasses and drank, and Elena felt something she hadn't felt in months: pure professional pride, untainted by personal complications. She was good at her job, really good. The Summit Tech acquisition proved it. The successful defense against the lawsuit proved it. Her growing reputation in the industry proved it. Derek could have his engagement and his new life. Lila could move on to another job. Elena had what mattered: her career, her integrity, her independence. And that was worth more than any marriage built on lies. The formal confrontation that Elena had been dreading never quite materialized in the dramatic way she imagined. Instead, it happened in pieces, small encounters and distant observations that built toward an inevitable conclusion. Warmer weather brought busier schedules. Elena threw herself into work with renewed energy. The Summit Tech success had caught the attention of other companies looking for Shaw Capital to invest in their restructuring. She was meeting with potential clients regularly, evaluating opportunities, building her portfolio. It was at one of these meetings that she saw them. She was having lunch with a potential client at a restaurant downtown when Derek and Lila walked in. Elena's hand tightened on her water glass, but she didn't look away. She watched as the hostess seated them a few tables over, watched as Derek pulled out Lila's chair, watched as they settled in, close and intimate, completely absorbed in each other. Lila saw her first. Elena caught the moment recognition hit. The widening eyes, the hand on Derek's arm, the whispered words. Derek looked up, and his expression hardened when he spotted her. Elena returned her attention to her client, a woman named Jennifer, who ran a struggling software company. As I was saying, the key to successful restructuring is understanding which assets are worth preserving and which are holding you back. "And how do you determine that?" Jennifer asked, oblivious to the drama unfolding nearby. "Data analysis, performance metrics, honest assessment of value versus cost." Elena continued explaining her process, hyper-aware of Derek and Lila watching from across the restaurant. The meal passed in professional conversation. Elena never looked their way again, though she felt their stares like heat on her skin. When the check came, she paid it and stood to leave. She had to walk past their table to reach the exit. As she approached, Lila's voice cut through the ambient restaurant noise. "Must be nice having all that money to throw around. Wonder whose work actually earned it." Elena stopped, turned, looked directly at Lila for the first time since the termination. "Excuse me." "You heard me." Lila's face was flushed, her eyes bright with anger or wine or both. "You walk around like you're so successful, but you just steal other people's companies and fire hard-working people to make yourself look good." Derek put a hand on Lila's arm. "Don't." But Lila shook him off. "No, she needs to hear this. She ruined my career because she was jealous. She couldn't stand that Derek chose me over her." The restaurant had gone quiet. People at nearby tables were watching with undisguised interest. Jennifer stood a few feet away, clearly uncomfortable. Elena could have walked away, should have walked away. But months of whispers and accusations and controlled responses had built up inside her, and something finally snapped. "I didn't ruin your career," Elena said, her voice calm but cold. "Your career was failing long before I entered the picture. Your performance reviews were mediocre. Your expense reports were questionable. Your department was over budget and underperforming. I simply made a business decision based on data and professional standards." It's documentation," Elena interrupted. "Everything I did was reviewed by legal counsel, HR, and the board. If you think it was personal retaliation, you already tried suing. How did that work out for you?" Lila's face went pale, then red. Derek stood up. "That's enough. Let's go." But Elena wasn't finished. Months of being painted as the villain, the cold corporate ice queen who drove her husband away, came pouring out. "You want to talk about stealing? You pursued a married man. You participated in a relationship built on lies and cheating. You helped him spend money I earned while planning your future together." Elena's voice never rose, but it cut like a blade. "And when he finally left me for you, when he asked for a divorce, while already engaged to you, you celebrated it publicly? So don't stand there and talk to me about ethics or fairness." "He was unhappy," Lila shot back. "He was trapped in a loveless marriage with someone who cared more about work than her own husband." "He was supported," Elena corrected. "For years I paid for his life, his failed businesses, his expenses, his dreams that never materialized. I invested in him emotionally and financially while building my career. And when I was working, he was video calling you, planning his exit, consulting lawyers about how to take as much from me as possible when he left." Derek stepped between them. "Stop it, both of you." Elena looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since the divorce. He seemed smaller somehow, less significant. The man she had loved and trusted for years had become a stranger whose opinion no longer mattered. "You're right," Elena said. "This is pointless. You two deserve each other. Enjoy your life together." She turned and walked out, Jennifer hurrying behind her. "I'm so sorry about that," Jennifer said once they were on the sidewalk. "That must have been awful." "It was clarifying," Elena replied. "Sometimes you need to say things out loud to realize how true they are." They parted ways and Elena returned to her office. Her hands were shaking slightly from adrenaline, but her head was clear. That confrontation had been building for months. She hadn't planned it, hadn't wanted it, but now that it was done, she felt lighter. She had said her piece. She had defended herself. She had stopped being the silent victim in their narrative. Maya knocked on her door an hour later. "I heard about the restaurant. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, better than fine, actually." Elena smiled wryly. "I might have broken my own rule about staying above it all, but it felt good to finally tell the truth." "Good for you. They deserved it." Maya hesitated. "For what it's worth, I think you handled that with remarkable restraint. If someone said that to me, I would have thrown a drink in their face." "Tempting, but I like my suits too much to risk the dry cleaning bill." They both laughed, and Elena realized it was the first time in months she had genuinely laughed about anything related to the divorce. That evening she got a text from an unknown number. "You embarrassed Lila in public. That was cruel and unnecessary. Derek." Elena stared at it for a long moment, then blocked that number too. She was done with his attempts to make her feel guilty for standing up for herself. Done with him trying to control the narrative. The next morning, there was a voicemail from Vivian. "I heard about yesterday, just calling to make sure you're okay and to remind you not to engage with them again. The divorce is final, the lawsuit is dismissed. You don't owe them anything, not apologies, not explanations, not responses. Stay strong." Elena saved the message. Vivian was right. This was the last time she would let Derek and Lila provoke a reaction. They were her past. She needed to focus on her future. But the confrontation had done something unexpected. Word spread quickly through the professional community. Not the details, but the general story. The ex-wife who had caught her successful husband cheating, handled the divorce with grace, survived a baseless lawsuit, and then finally spoke her truth when pushed too far. Suddenly, Elena wasn't the corporate ice queen anymore. She was a woman who had been wronged, but refused to be a victim, a professional who had maintained her integrity despite personal attacks, a success story about resilience and boundaries. Her phone started ringing with interview requests. Business magazines wanted to profile her. Professional organizations invited her to speak about leadership and ethics. The narrative was shifting, and she was no longer the villain. She declined most of the interview requests. She didn't want to be known for her divorce. But she accepted a few speaking engagements, focusing on business strategy and professional decision-making rather than personal drama. At one such event, she gave a talk about ethical leadership and corporate restructuring. She spoke about the importance of documentation, of separating personal feelings from professional responsibilities, of making hard decisions for the right reasons. After her talk, several women approached her privately. They shared their own stories, divorces, betrayals, professional setbacks caused by personal complications. They thanked her for showing that it was possible to maintain integrity while protecting yourself. "You didn't let them make you small," one woman said. "You didn't hide or apologize or pretend it didn't hurt. You just kept being excellent at your job." That stuck with Elena. She hadn't let them make her small. Despite everything, she had continued doing what she was good at, building her career, creating value. Proving her worth had nothing to do with her marriage. Summer arrived with warmth and new opportunities. Elena signed new clients and closed another successful acquisition. Her reputation was stronger than ever. Her team was thriving. Her life was moving forward. She heard through the grapevine that Lila had found a new job at a smaller company with a significant pay cut, that Derek was struggling with his own job, having burned bridges by taking so much time off during the divorce, that their engagement had been postponed indefinitely due to financial concerns. Elena felt nothing when she heard this news. Not satisfaction or vindication or even curiosity, just nothing. They were no longer relevant to her life. She had confronted them, spoken her truth, and moved on. That chapter was closed. Now she was writing new chapters, better ones where she was the hero of her own story. The season passed in productive warmth. Elena's calendar filled with meetings and negotiations and success stories. She worked long hours by choice rather than avoidance, genuinely enjoying the challenges of her job. The divorce was behind her. The lawsuit was dismissed. The confrontation had brought closure. Life, it seemed, was finally moving forward. It was during this time that she started hearing the rumors, whispers at industry conferences, careful comments from colleagues who shared mutual acquaintances with Derek. Stories that trickled back through the professional network about trouble in paradise. Lila and Derek were fighting constantly. Money was tight. The wedding planning had stalled. The apartment they shared was small and poorly maintained. Derek's job situation remained precarious. Lila's new position wasn't working out. Elena heard these things and felt only distance. Their problems weren't her concern. She had her own life to focus on. But then Maya came into her office one morning with an unusually serious expression. "Derek tried to call the main line asking for you. Security turned him away, but he left a message." Maya set a note on Elena's desk. "He wants you to help Lila get her job back. Says you have influence and could make a call." Elena read the note and laughed. A short, disbelieving sound. "He wants me to help the woman he cheated on me with get a job? After everything?" That's what he said. The message mentioned doing the right thing and not holding grudges. Incredible! Elena crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash. "Tell security if he tries again, they're not to pass along messages. He has no business contacting me." Already done. But Derek, apparently, wasn't willing to take no for an answer. He showed up at Shaw Capital's building one afternoon. Security called Elena's office to inform her that a Mr. Derek Harlan was in the lobby demanding to see her. "Tell him I'm unavailable," Elena said. Later, Maya informed her that he was still there, growing agitated. Security is concerned he might cause a scene. Elena closed her laptop and stood. Fine. I'll talk to him in the lobby. Call Andrew and have him come down too. I want a witness. She took the elevator down with Andrew trailing behind, his legal pad in hand. When the doors opened, she saw Derek pacing near the security desk. He looked different from the last time she had seen him. Thinner. Tired. His clothes were wrinkled and his hair needed cutting. Elena, he said when he spotted her. Thank God. I need to talk to you. You can speak to my attorney? Elena said coolly. I have no reason to talk to you directly. Please, this is important. His voice carried a desperation that might have moved her once. Now it just irritated her. Lila lost her new job. She's been out of work for some time. She applied back at Summit Tech, but they won't even give her an interview. I know you have connections there. I know you could help if you wanted to. Elena stared at him. You want me to help the woman you cheated on me with get a job? I know how it sounds, but do you? Elena's voice was sharp. Because it sounds like you have no concept of appropriate boundaries or basic human decency. You cheated on me with her. You divorced me to be with her. She tried to sue my company for wrongful termination, and now you want me to use my professional reputation to help her? She's struggling, Elena. We both are. I thought you were better than holding grudges. This isn't about grudges. This is about reality. Elena crossed her arms. Lila was terminated for legitimate performance issues. She subsequently filed a baseless lawsuit that cost both her and my company time and money. No company wants to hire someone with that history. That's a consequence of her own choices. You ruined her career. No, she ruined her own career by sleeping with her boss's ex-husband and then trying to sue when she faced professional consequences. I made a business decision. She made it personal. That's not my fault. Derek's face flushed with anger. I knew you'd be like this, cold and calculating. No wonder I fell out of love with you. Derek, you were never in love with me. You were in love with my bank account and what it could provide for you. Elena finally let herself say what she had been thinking for months. You married me because I was successful and you were broke. You stayed with me because I paid for your life. You left me when you found someone else to support you. But Lila doesn't make what I make, does she? And now you're discovering that love doesn't pay the rent. That's not fair. It's completely fair. You consulted with a lawyer about getting alimony from me. I have the emails. You tried to take half of everything I had earned. When that didn't work, when you ended up with almost nothing in the divorce, you convinced yourself it was because I was vindictive. But it was just the law. It was just consequences. Security had moved closer, sensing the conversation was escalating. Andrew had his hand on Elena's arm, a gentle reminder to stay calm. You need to leave, Andrew said to Derek. You're on private property and Ms. Shaw has asked you not to contact her. You need to leave, Andrew repeated, firmer this time. If you contact Ms. Shaw again, we'll file a restraining order for harassment. Do you understand? Derek looked between them, his expression desperate and angry and defeated all at once. You're really going to do this? You're going to let us struggle when you could help? I'm going to live my life without any obligation to my ex-husband and his affair partner, Elena said. What happens to you now is not my concern. You made your choices. These are your consequences. She turned and walked back to the elevator, Andrew beside her. Behind them, security was escorting Derek toward the exit. She heard him say something else, but the elevator doors closed and cut off his words. Back in her office, Elena sat at her desk and let herself shake. Her hands trembled as she poured water from the bottle on her desk. Andrew sat across from her, watching with concern. Are you okay? He asked. I'm angry, Elena admitted. The audacity of him showing up here demanding I help her after everything they did. Like I owe them something. Like I'm the bad guy for not bailing them out of the mess they created. You handled that perfectly. You stated clear boundaries and didn't engage with his manipulation. He called me cold. He's projecting. He wants you to feel guilty so you'll do what he wants. Andrew leaned forward. Elena, you don't owe them anything. Not help, not forgiveness, not even basic civility at this point. They burned that bridge themselves. She nodded, knowing he was right, but still feeling the sting of Derek's words. Cold, calculating, the same accusations thrown at successful women for generations. That evening, alone in her house, Elena poured herself a glass of wine and sat on her back deck. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Her yard was perfectly maintained, the lawn green and lush. Everything about her life was orderly and successful and completely under her control. Was that cold? Was taking care of herself and refusing to help people who had hurt her somehow wrong? She pulled out her phone and called her best friend Rachel, someone she had known since college who lived across the country now. Tell me honestly, Elena said after explaining the situation. Am I a terrible person for not helping them? Are you kidding? Rachel's voice was incredulous. Elena, that man cheated on you, tried to steal your money in the divorce, and now wants you to use your reputation to help his mistress? Tell me you didn't actually consider it. I didn't. But his words got to me. The cold, calculating thing. Oh, please. You know what men call women who protect themselves? Cold. You know what they call women who set boundaries? Calculating. It's manipulation. Don't fall for it. I don't want to be vindictive. I don't want my decisions to be driven by revenge. They're not. Refusing to help someone who wronged you isn't revenge. It's common sense. You're not actively trying to hurt them. You're just declining to save them from their own consequences. That's healthy boundaries, not vindictiveness. After they hung up, Elena felt better. Rachel was right. She wasn't obligated to rescue Derek and Lila from their own bad decisions. She had every right to focus on her own life and career without guilt. The following week, she heard through another colleague that Derek had tried to contact two other women at Shaw Capital, hoping one of them would intercede with Elena on Lila's behalf. Both had refused and reported the contact to HR. HR sent Elena a formal request. Did she want to pursue a restraining order against her ex-husband? She considered it. The repeated contact was borderline harassment. But a restraining order would be public record. It would become another story for people to whisper about. No, she told Andrew. Just document everything and keep security informed. If he shows up again, we'll reconsider. He didn't show up again. The calls and messages stopped. Either Derek had finally gotten the message, or he had found another target for his desperation. Elena didn't care which. She was done thinking about him, done letting his drama intrude on her peace, done feeling guilty for protecting herself. New projects kept her busy. Elena was busier than ever, which was exactly how she liked it. Work was concrete, measurable. She could see the results of her efforts in profit margins and successful integrations and companies saved from bankruptcy. This was her life now. Clean, professional, focused. No complications, no betrayals, no more pretending that marriage meant anything other than legal entanglement. She was better off alone. She was certain of it. Or at least she told herself that with enough conviction to almost believe it. She almost skipped a business conference in a major city. She was tired of traveling, tired of networking events, tired of the performance of professional socializing. But Maya had already booked the tickets, and the conference featured several panels on acquisition strategy that were relevant to her work. So she went. The conference was held at a sprawling hotel near a large lake. Elena checked in, reviewed her schedule, and prepared for several days of presentations and small talk. The first day passed in a blur of panels and keynote speeches. She took notes, made a few useful contacts, and retired to her room early. The second day started with a breakfast panel on ethical leadership and corporate restructuring. Elena was one of several speakers, discussing the Summit Tech acquisition without mentioning any of the personal drama. She spoke about maintaining professional standards, documenting decisions, balancing profit motives with employee welfare. After the panel, several people approached her with questions and business cards. She was fielding one particularly detailed question about integration timelines when she noticed a man waiting patiently at the edge of the group. He was tall, maybe in his 40s, with silver threading through his dark hair, well dressed in a tailored suit that suggested success without ostentation. He waited until the crowd dispersed before approaching. "Ms. Shaw, I'm Adrian Vale. I really enjoyed your presentation." He extended his hand and she shook it, noting the firm grip and warm smile. "Your approach to restructuring is refreshingly ethical. Too many firms prioritize profit over people." "Thank you," Elena said, taking his offered business card. Adrian Vale, CEO, Vale Technology Consulting. Though I'd argue profit and people don't have to be mutually exclusive, treating employees well usually improves the bottom line long term. "I completely agree, which is rare in our industry." He gestured toward the hotel restaurant. "I know this is forward, but would you have time for coffee? I have some questions about your acquisition strategy that might be relevant to a situation my company is dealing with." Elena hesitated. She had learned to be cautious about business meetings that started as casual coffee invitations. But Adrian's demeanor was professional, his interest seemed genuine, and the restaurant was public and crowded. "Sure," she said. "I have some time before my next commitment." Over coffee, Adrian explained his situation. His consulting firm had been approached by a mid-sized company looking for help restructuring their IT department. The company was struggling financially, but had strong underlying fundamentals. Exactly the type of situation Elena specialized in. "The challenge is they've been mismanaged for years," Adrian said. "The employees are talented but demoralized. The expenses are out of control. They need someone who can come in, assess everything honestly, and make tough decisions without destroying morale entirely." "That's a delicate balance," Elena agreed. "People are more likely to accept difficult changes if they understand the reasoning and feel like the process is fair." They talked strategy for some time. Adrian was sharp, asking insightful questions and building on her suggestions. He had clearly done his homework on her work with Summit Tech. But he never mentioned her divorce or the lawsuit or any of the personal drama that had circulated through industry gossip. It was refreshing. "This has been incredibly helpful," Adrian said as their time ran out. "Would you be willing to consult on this project? Obviously, I'd compensate you for your time, and your firm would get credit for any successful outcomes." Elena considered. She didn't usually do outside consulting. Shaw Capital kept her busy enough. But the project sounded interesting, and Adrian seemed like someone she could work with professionally. "Send me the details. I'll review them and let you know if I can make time in my schedule." They exchanged contact information and parted ways. Elena went to her next panel and didn't think much more about it. But that evening, she received an email from Adrian with a detailed brief on the consulting project. It was thorough and well organized, clearly representing weeks of analysis. The company in question was indeed a good candidate for restructuring. The work would be challenging, but manageable. She replied, "This looks like a solid project. I can commit to some hours a week for the coming period. My rates are attached." His response came within an hour. "Perfect. Let's set up a kickoff call for next week." Over the following period, Elena found herself working closely with Adrian on the consulting project. Their weekly video calls were efficient and productive. He respected her expertise, implemented her suggestions, and provided thoughtful feedback. The project was going well. The target company was responding positively to the restructuring plan and showing early signs of improvement. But more than that, Elena found she actually enjoyed working with Adrian. His approach to business aligned with hers: ethical, strategic, focused on sustainable success rather than quick profits. He was funny in a dry, understated way. He asked good questions and actually listened to the answers. They met in person again for a progress review at the target company. They spent the day touring facilities, meeting with department heads, reviewing implementation. That evening, Adrian suggested dinner to debrief. Over Italian food at a quiet restaurant, they discussed the project's successes and challenges. But as the meal progressed, the conversation drifted to more personal territory. "Can I ask you something off the record?" Adrian said as they waited for dessert. "Sure." "How do you maintain optimism about people after dealing with situations like Summit Tech? I read about the lawsuit. It must have been frustrating to face legal action after making sound business decisions." Elena appreciated that he didn't ask about her divorce directly. "I try to remember that most people act from their own pain and fear rather than malice. The person who sued wasn't really angry at me personally. She was angry at her circumstances and I was a convenient target." "That's a remarkably generous interpretation." "Maybe. Or maybe I just don't want to become cynical." Elena paused. "I could let those experiences make me bitter. Assume everyone has an agenda. Trust no one. But that would mean they won. They'd have changed who I am. I refuse to give them that power." Adrian studied her with open admiration. "I think that takes remarkable strength." The dinner ended with a handshake and plans for their next check-in call. But something had shifted. Elena felt it as she drove home that evening. A lightness she hadn't experienced in a long time. Not attraction exactly, or not just attraction, but possibility. The sense that maybe, eventually, she could trust someone again. She didn't act on it, didn't pursue it, but she didn't close herself off to it either. The consulting project was wrapping up successfully. The target company was showing significant improvement. Adrian's firm was getting excellent feedback. Shaw Capital was being praised for the ethical approach to restructuring. "We should celebrate," Adrian said during their final project call. "Dinner? My treat. You've earned it." Elena smiled at her computer screen. "Professional dinner or personal dinner?" There was a pause. Then Adrian laughed. "How about we start with professional and see where it goes?" They met at a steakhouse downtown. The conversation flowed easily from business to books to travel to philosophy. Adrian was divorced some time ago. "Amicable," he said. "Just two people who wanted different things, no kids, no drama." "I'm cautious about relationships now," he admitted. "I don't jump into anything without really thinking it through." "I understand that completely," Elena said. "I'm not even sure I want to be in a relationship again. The last one ended badly enough to make me question the whole concept. Can I ask what happened? Or is that too personal?" Elena considered. She had told this story so many times. To lawyers, to friends, to colleagues who asked. But she had never told it to someone who might matter to her future. "My husband had an affair," she said simply, "with someone who worked at a company I had just acquired. The timing was complicated. The divorce was messy, and I'm still figuring out what I want next." Adrian nodded slowly. "That sounds painful. I'm sorry." "I'm not. Not anymore. It taught me a lot about boundaries and self-worth, about not settling for people who don't value you." She met his eyes across the table. "I'm okay being alone. I need to be okay being alone before I can be with anyone else." "That's very self-aware." Adrian smiled. "For what it's worth, I'm okay being alone too. But I'm also open to not being alone with the right person. No rush, no pressure, just possibility." Possibility. That word again. It felt less frightening now than it had before. They finished dinner and said goodbye in the parking lot. Adrian didn't try to kiss her, or ask for a date, or push for anything more. He just said, "Let me know if you'd like to have coffee sometime." No professional agenda. Just two people who enjoy talking to each other. "I'd like that," Elena said. She drove home feeling lighter than she had in years. Not because Adrian was some perfect romance, but because he represented something she had stopped believing in, the possibility that not everyone would betray her, that trust could be rebuilt slowly, carefully, with someone who respected boundaries and understood her caution. Over the following weeks, they texted occasionally, nothing heavy or flirtatious, just interesting articles they'd read or funny observations about work. It was easy and uncomplicated. Elena accepted his invitation to a gallery opening, then to a concert, then to a casual Sunday brunch. None of it felt like pressure or performance, just two people getting to know each other without expectations. They were seeing each other regularly. Nothing serious, nothing rushed, but something genuine and growing at its own pace. Maya noticed the change in Elena. "You seem happy," she commented one morning. "I am," Elena said, surprised to realize it was true. "Things are good right now. Work is good. Life is good." "Is there someone?" Maya asked with a knowing smile. "Maybe. Eventually. We'll see." Elena wasn't ready to share details yet. This thing with Adrian felt too new, too precious to expose to scrutiny. "I'm taking it slow." "Smart," Maya said. "After everything, you deserve to be careful." Elena agreed. She did deserve to be careful, but she also deserved to be happy. To be open to possibility, to not let Derek's betrayal define her entire future. She was building a new life. One where her worth wasn't tied to a marriage or defined by someone else's choices. One where she was successful and independent and slowly learning to trust again. It felt like victory in a way that revenge never could. Sometime later, Elena stood in front of her bathroom mirror adjusting her earrings. The reflection showed a woman transformed, not physically, but in some essential way that had nothing to do with appearance. She looked confident, content, at peace with herself in a way she hadn't been during her marriage. Tonight was the Shaw Capital Annual Charity Gala, the biggest event on the company's social calendar. Many guests from the business and philanthropic communities gathering to celebrate the year's successes and raise money for educational initiatives. Elena had attended this event for several years, always with Derek on her arm, always feeling slightly uncomfortable in the performance of it all. This year, Adrian would be her date. They had been seeing each other for some time now, slowly building something that felt solid and real. He understood her need for independence. He respected her career. He never made her feel guilty for working late or prioritizing important meetings. He had his own successful company, his own busy life, his own complete identity that didn't require her to fill any gaps. They were partners, not dependencies. It was healthier than anything Elena had experienced before. "You look beautiful," Adrian said from the bedroom doorway. He was already dressed in his tuxedo, looking distinguished and calm. "Ready?" "Ready," Elena confirmed, smoothing her navy blue gown. It was elegant without being flashy, professional without being boring. She had chosen it carefully, aware that tonight would be full of people who knew her history and would be watching to see how she had survived the past year. They arrived at the hotel ballroom fashionably late. The event was already in full swing. Champagne flowing, string quartet playing, hundreds of guests mingling in evening wear. Elena spotted colleagues and clients and board members. She took Adrian's arm and stepped into the crowd. The evening passed in a pleasant blur of conversations and connections. People complimented Shaw Capital's successful year. They praised the Summit Tech integration. They asked about new acquisition targets. Several women pulled Elena aside to tell her quietly that they admired how she had handled her divorce, how she had maintained her professionalism, how she had emerged stronger. "You're an inspiration," one woman said, a CFO Elena had worked with on a different project. "My husband thinks I work too much. Seeing you thrive on your own makes me feel less guilty about prioritizing my career." Elena squeezed her hand. "Never feel guilty for being good at what you do." At some point, the formal program began. Shaw Capital's CEO gave a speech about the company's achievements. Maya was recognized for years of exceptional service. Elena received an award for her leadership on the Summit Tech acquisition and the firm's overall growth. She accepted it with grace, giving credit to her team and emphasizing the importance of ethical business practices. As she returned to her seat, Adrian squeezed her hand. "You earned that," he said quietly. "All of it." She had. She really had. Despite everything, she had done excellent work this year. She had proven that personal turmoil didn't have to derail professional success. She had shown that being hurt didn't mean being broken. It was during the dessert course that Elena saw them. Derek and Lila standing near the entrance, clearly debating whether to come in. Derek was wearing an ill-fitting tuxedo that had probably been rented. Lila wore a dress that was too flashy for the event, too obviously trying to impress. They looked out of place among the understated wealth and quiet confidence of the room. Elena watched as they finally entered, hovering at the edge of the crowd. Derek was scanning the room, probably looking for people he used to know through Elena, friends who had dropped him after the divorce, colleagues who had sided with her when they learned the truth. "Is that him?" Adrian asked, following her gaze. She had told him the whole story over the months they had been seeing each other. He knew about Derek's cheating, the divorce, the attempted lawsuits, the confrontations. "That's him," Elena confirmed. "And her." "Do you want to leave?" "No." Elena turned her attention back to her dessert. "We're not leaving because they're here. This is my event, my company, my night. If anyone should leave, it's them." Adrian smiled at that. Good answer. Across the room, Derek had spotted her. She watched him say something to Lila, watched Lila's expression shift from nervous to angry. They were having an argument right there at the edge of the elegant ballroom. Elena turned away. Whatever was happening in their relationship wasn't her concern. She had heard through the grapevine that things weren't going well. Derek's job situation remained unstable. Lila had taken a position far below her previous role. Money was tight. The wedding had been pushed back indefinitely. Their love story, built on betrayal and stolen moments, was buckling under the weight of reality. But Elena didn't feel satisfaction at their struggles. She didn't feel vindication or triumph. She just felt distant. Like they were characters in a story she used to care about, but had since moved on from. Elena. She turned to find Derek standing beside their table. Up close, he looked worse than he had from across the room. Thinner, tired. The cocky confidence he used to carry had evaporated, replaced by something desperate and diminished. "Derek," she said evenly, "I'm surprised to see you here. I still have friends in the industry. One of them invited me." He glanced at Adrian, then back at her. "Can we talk, privately?" "No." Elena's voice was pleasant but firm. "There's nothing we need to discuss." "Please, just a few minutes. I need to explain." "You don't need to explain anything. It's over. We're divorced. What you do now is your business." She gestured to Adrian. "This is Adrian Vale. Adrian, this is Derek Harlan, my ex-husband." Adrian stood and shook Derek's hand with perfect politeness. "Nice to meet you." Derek looked between them, clearly thrown by how comfortable they were together, how happy Elena seemed. "You're dating already?" "I don't think my personal life is any of your concern," Elena said. I wanted to say I'm sorry for how things ended, for the things I said. I was angry and I took it out on you when you were just protecting yourself." The words came out rushed and rehearsed. "And I wanted to ask if there was any way you could help Lila find work. She's really struggling." "Derek, stop." Elena cut him off. "I'm not going to help Lila. I'm not going to help you. You made your choices. These are your consequences. I've moved on with my life and I suggest you do the same with yours." "But we're struggling. The divorce settlement left me with nothing. We can barely afford rent." "The divorce settlement gave you exactly what you were entitled to under the prenup you signed. If you're struggling financially, that's because you spent years not building a career while I supported you." Elena kept her voice low but clear. "I don't owe you anything. Not money, not help, not sympathy. You cheated on me, lied to me, tried to take everything I had worked for, and then acted like I was the villain for protecting myself. I'm done with that narrative." Derek's face flushed. "I'm trying to apologize." "I don't want your apology. I want you to leave me alone." Elena stood, Adrian rising beside her. "This is my event at my company with my colleagues. You shouldn't be here. Please go." For a moment, Derek looked like he might argue. Then his shoulders slumped. He nodded once and walked away back to where Lila was waiting. Elena watched them have another brief, heated conversation before they left together, disappearing through the ballroom doors. "You okay?" Adrian asked softly. "I'm perfect," Elena said, and meant it. Seeing Derek diminished and desperate should have felt like victory. But it just felt like closure. He was no longer the man she had loved or the villain in her story. He was just someone she used to know who had made bad choices and was living with the consequences. She had moved on. Truly, completely moved on. The rest of the evening passed beautifully. Elena danced with Adrian, laughed with her colleagues, celebrated the year's successes. She felt light and free in a way she hadn't felt in years. Maybe ever. As they left the gala around midnight, walking to the car under the bright city lights, Adrian put his arm around her shoulders. "That was quite an evening," he said. "It was." Elena leaned into him slightly. "Thank you for being there, for not making it weird when he showed up. You handled it perfectly." "You didn't need me for that." Adrian opened the car door for her, "but I'm glad I could be there anyway." They drove through the quiet streets, the city peaceful at this late hour. Elena looked out the window and thought about how different her life was now compared to before. Then she had been discovering her husband's betrayal, gathering evidence, preparing for battle. She had been hurt and angry and determined to protect herself. Now she was just happy, genuinely content with her life. "Do you ever regret it?" Adrian asked as they pulled up to her house. "The divorce, I mean. Even knowing everything, do you ever wish you tried to make it work?" Elena considered the question seriously. "No. I regret that I didn't see the truth sooner. I regret wasting years on someone who didn't value me, but I don't regret leaving once I knew. That was the best decision I made." "Good," Adrian smiled. "Because you deserve someone who sees your worth, who appreciates what you bring to a relationship, who doesn't need you to be less so they can feel like more." They sat in the car for a moment, the engine ticking as it cooled. Then Adrian turned to her. "I'm falling in love with you," he said simply. "I wanted you to know that. No pressure, no expectations, but I wanted to be honest." Elena's breath caught. She had been so careful, so guarded, so determined not to rush into anything. But hearing those words, she realized she felt the same way. Not the desperate, codependent love she had confused for partnership with Derek, but something steadier, something that made her feel stronger rather than smaller. "I'm falling in love with you too," she said. "It terrifies me, but in a good way." They kissed in the driveway, soft and unhurried. When they pulled apart, Elena felt certain of something she hadn't been sure of in a long time. She could trust again, not blindly, not foolishly, but carefully and deliberately, with someone who had earned it. "Come inside," she said. "Let's have coffee and talk about the future, our future." Adrian smiled. "I'd like that." As they walked to the door together, Elena glanced back at the empty street. Somewhere out there, Derek and Lila were dealing with their own struggles. But that wasn't her story anymore. She had written her own ending, one where she emerged stronger, wiser, and ready for something real. The house was dark as they entered, but Elena turned on the lights one by one, illuminating the space she had reclaimed as solely hers. It was beautiful, peaceful. A home rather than just a house. "Coffee or wine?" she asked Adrian as they settled in the living room. "Wine?" he said. "We're celebrating." "What are we celebrating?" "You. Your success. Your strength. Your ability to turn pain into power." Adrian accepted the glass she handed him. "And if I'm being selfish, I'm celebrating that I found you when you were ready to be found." They talked late into the night, making plans and sharing dreams. Adrian wanted to expand his consulting firm. Elena was considering a promotion that would give her even more authority at Shaw Capital. They talked about travel, places they wanted to see, experiences they wanted to share. They talked about keeping their independence while building something together. It was the kind of conversation Elena had never been able to have with Derek. He had always needed her to be smaller, to need him, to center her life around his fragile ego. Adrian wanted her to be exactly who she was, ambitious, successful, strong. When he finally left late, Elena stood in her doorway and watched him drive away. Then she closed the door and leaned against it, smiling in the darkness. Some time ago she had been devastated. Then she had been angry. Then she had been healing. Now she was thriving. The next morning, Elena woke early and went for a run. The air was crisp and clear, leaves crunching under her feet. She ran her usual route through the neighborhood, pushing herself harder than normal, feeling the burn in her muscles and the strength in her stride. When she returned home, she showered and dressed for the day, even though it was the weekend. She had learned that maintaining structure and purpose made her happy. She didn't need lazy days anymore. She needed goals and challenges and reasons to get up and be excellent. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Saw you at the gala last night. You looked amazing. Adrian is wonderful. So happy for you." Elena replied, "Thank you. I'm happy too. Really happy." Another text came through, this one from Vivian. "Heard your ex showed up at the gala. Everything okay?" "Everything's perfect," Elena typed back. "He's not my problem anymore." She spent the day working on a presentation for the board, reviewing acquisition targets for the next period, and planning her schedule for the upcoming week. In the afternoon, Adrian called to invite her to dinner at his place. "I'm cooking," he said. "Fair warning, I'm decent but not amazing in the kitchen." "I'll risk it," Elena said, laughing. That evening at Adrian's modern downtown apartment, they cooked together, or rather, Adrian cooked while Elena kept him company and chopped vegetables. They ate on his balcony overlooking the city lights, talking about everything and nothing. "Can I ask you something?" Adrian said as they cleared the dishes. "What was the moment you knew you were going to be okay after the divorce? When did you realize you'd survive this?" Elena thought back. It was during the lawsuit, when Lila was trying to sue for wrongful termination and Derek was calling demanding I help her. I realized I had been so afraid of being seen as the villain that I was letting them control my narrative. But then I just stopped caring what they thought. I knew I had acted with integrity. I knew my decisions were sound. Their opinion of me didn't matter anymore. That must have been liberating. It was. It still is. Elena leaned against the counter. I spent years trying to be the perfect wife for someone who didn't appreciate it. I supported his dreams, paid his bills, made myself smaller so he could feel bigger. And when that ended, I had to remember who I was before him, who I could be without him. "And who are you?" Adrian asked, moving closer. "I'm someone who doesn't need anyone else to complete her, who can be in a relationship without losing herself, who knows her worth isn't tied to whether someone else loves her." Elena met his eyes. "I'm someone who survived betrayal and came out stronger. And I'm someone who's ready to build something new with someone who deserves her." Adrian kissed her then, deep and meaningful. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I'm going to spend every day earning that," he said. "I promise you that." "Good," Elena whispered, "because I don't settle anymore. I won't diminish myself for anyone. If this is going to work, it works with me as I am. Ambitious, busy, successful, and unwilling to compromise on what matters to me. I wouldn't want you any other way." They stayed up late talking about the future, not promises or commitments, but possibilities. Maybe they would move in together eventually. Maybe they would travel to Europe next summer. Maybe they would build something lasting. Or maybe not. Maybe this relationship would run its course too. But if it did, Elena knew she would survive. She had already proven to herself that she could handle anything. She had lost a marriage and kept her integrity. She had been betrayed and remained strong. She had been called cold and calculating and had refused to let those words define her. She had won. Not because Derek and Lila were struggling, not because she had more money or success or happiness than they did, but because she had refused to let their betrayal break her. She had protected herself, maintained her standards, and built a life she was proud of. That was victory. That was revenge in its purest form. Living well, loving fully, and never letting the people who hurt you determine your worth. Sometime later, Elena was promoted to managing director of Shaw Capital. It was the culmination of years of hard work, successful acquisitions, and proven leadership. She celebrated with her team, with Adrian, with a handful of people who had supported her through the hardest year of her life. At the celebration dinner, Maya raised her glass in a toast. To Elena, the smartest, strongest, most resilient woman I know, you earned every bit of this success. Elena looked around the table at her team, at Adrian sitting beside her with quiet pride in his eyes, at the life she had built from the wreckage of her marriage. She thought about Derek and Lila briefly, heard they had finally called off their engagement, heard they had gone their separate ways, heard that karma had delivered its own justice without her having to lift a finger. But those were just footnotes in a story that was no longer about them. This story was about her, about resilience and strength and refusing to be diminished, about protecting yourself without apology, about knowing your worth and never settling for less than you deserve. Thank you, Elena said, raising her own glass, to all of you and to new beginnings. They drank to that, and Elena felt the last piece of hurt finally released from her chest. She was free, truly, completely free. The divorce had been the end of one chapter, but this promotion, this relationship, this life she had built on her own terms, this was the beginning of something so much better. She had wanted revenge, and she had gotten it. Not through destruction or retaliation, but through her own success, through refusing to be broken, through building a life so full and rich and happy that her past couldn't touch it. That was the best revenge of all, and it felt like flying.